AI slop is everywhere.
There's an app and an orb
I get excited about this stuff.
and a token, and there's world.
I would love to be able to just put a filter. Only show me things that came from real people.
And there's tools for humanity, and
This is critical infrastructure.
how do you manage that?
The world that we imagine in the future is one where there are lots of AI agents. They're doing things. It's good, but you can tell whether you're interacting with an AI agent or with a person.
AI agents are about to run, half of the internet for us. And without a way to prove who's human, that future turns chaotic fast. Adrian Ludwig is building world's proof of human layer so agents, apps, and money can transact safely without doxing identity. If you've heard of World, you maybe heard of Worldcoin and like these shiny orbs that look somewhat dystopian, somewhat techno-optopian, if that's not a word.
I think so. Optimism.
Yeah. Depending on where you're
optimism.
coming from. But we're going to go into all that today. So, Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Evan. Happy to be here.
I'd like to start with the problem. A good tech company is always says, we're solving this problem. How do you think about the problem that World is solving today versus maybe what you initially started the project out as?
Yeah, in the early days, the conversations that were happening between the founders, which were Sam Altman, Alex Blania, and a handful of other folks, primarily coming from a physics and ML background, was that they were anticipating that sometime into the future, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to tell the difference between a human and AI. And for them, that crystal ball 10 years ago, they didn't know whether people would believe it, whether it was something that we'd be able to explain. But now we look at the world and we're like, AI slop is everywhere. That slop is better than basically most humans in terms of how effective it is at communicating. So being able to differentiate humans from AI, like we're there, we're in that world right now. And what we have built at World is a stack of technology. It starts with a camera and the ability to prove that someone is human. It has a privacy-preserving mechanism for confirming that they are unique. And then also a privacy-preserving way for them to interact with all of the different services they use online without an identity following them from one service to the next, without somebody tracking what they're doing, or even without one service knowing that they use another service. And so it maintains the sense of humanness and also the sense of privacy that we have in the real world.
I mean, it makes sense. As an individual user, I do get annoyed with the AI comments. And
Yeah.
most of the time, I can only tell just because I spend too much time in large language models. But I know the regular person cannot.
Yep.
So you have the camera. Like the workflow is, I as a person, I come up, I stick the orb in my face, scans an eyeball, and something happens, something blockchain, right?
I mean, I think that's a sort of dramatic way to describe it. I think of it as you want to do something online and you want to have a World ID in order to do that. And that could be to access a video game network. Like we have a partnership with a company called Razer that has the idea of a Razer ID that you can use to access some of their services. They would like to know that those are real humans. There are some partnerships that we're establishing in the dating space. So Tinder in Japan is thinking about and we're in the process of sort of finalizing a product rollout there, where if you're going to use those services, they want to make sure that you're a real human and that you're over a certain age 18 is what's required for dating applications in Japan. And so you want to use one of those services. In order to do that, you need to have a verified ID. The way you get a verified ID is you go somewhere, the same way that you might go get a passport photo. But here you go to an orb, which is a special camera. That camera takes a few pictures, about a dozen. It looks at your whole face, confirms that it looks like a human face. It looks specifically at your eye, confirms that it looks like an actual human eye, and analyzes that to confirm that you're a real person. If so, then you are able to be verified, and you're then able to use your World ID to access those services and interact with those services.
So the competition would be when I'm doing a sign-up flow now and they want to verify human identity, typically it'll be a picture of my driver's license.
Right.
Is that like the primary competitor is those driver's license picture services?
Yeah, I think in some sense, yes. Although those driver's license services, we're not really trying to do the same thing that we're trying to do. We are not trying to establish who you are. We're not trying to establish that you have a valid driver's license. What we're trying to do is provide a foundational layer, which is this a real person or not? And it turns out people have tried to do that using existing identity and know your customer type interactions, but those don't do a good job of identifying whether they're fake or not. Like they're increasingly seeing people produce AI videos of a person holding an ID card that looks like a valid driver's license. And it generates the ID card. It generates the sort of not actually a human, but looks like a human face, and can get through those. And so those solutions haven't proven to be very effective at solving the AI challenge. The other thing that they do is the real humans that are using them are having their driver's license and their face uploaded in a way that's then being held by the person or the service, the company that is providing the service. And that puts them at risk long term for what happens if those images leak, what happens if they get broken into. And we've seen, even in the last month, several instances of trustworthy services that were holding images of their users and images of their IDs for perfectly valid reasons that were compromised. And so those users are now more subject not just to identity fraud, but also to AI being able to fake their identity. So those are some of the things that are they technically customer or competitors to what we're doing? Yes, but they're approaching it in such a different way that they're really not competitors at the base level.
Gotcha. So your argument would be, because we're collecting biometric data versus we're relying on government forms of identification or government confirmation of who you are, we're able to do things that these other verification of identity services cannot.
Actually, not quite.
Okay. Yeah, tell me more.
A big difference is that we're not collecting anything.
Okay.
So the way that the orb works, it runs algorithms on the camera that determine that you're a real human. It produces a proof of that. And in order to do that, we had to build a special purpose camera to analyze and confirm that you're a real human. Like, that's not what my Hasselblad camera does, or my Sony camera does, or my Nikon camera does. Those just take a picture. But our camera analyzes, is this a person, and then includes that information in the image set that's then given to the user. And so that's fundamentally different. And the way that it ends up being different is because that proof is created with the zero knowledge proof, there's no need to store a copy of the image because you have the proof. You don't need the copy of the image. And so the collection, and that phrase gets used every single time. And eventually I realized that it's like a basic confusion about the way the world has to work, because the way the world does work right now is most companies collect images. But that's not what they actually want. What they just want to know is it real or not? Are you a real human? Do I have proof that you're a real human? And so we've built this in a way that doesn't require us to collect images, doesn't require a service provider like a social network or a gaming platform or a dating network to collect those images either. They just need to know that it's truthful.
All right, well, that makes a ton of sense to me. And then I'm assuming you guys destroy the images and it's just the proof that remains afterwards?
We don't even need to destroy them. We give them to the user.
Gotcha.
And the user can hold on to them if they want. And there are some reasons why they might want to. So an example of one reason that they might want to, there's something that we've built that's called deepfakes. And what that allows is a confirmation that the image that you're seeing right now of my face is the same as the person who went to an orb and was verified. And so we can generate a proof that those are the same person, that they look the same, without actually revealing any additional information. Now, obviously, you can see my face, right? I'm on the camera. But what you don't know is this me? And so we can generate a proof that goes along with the image that you're seeing that says, yes, this is that person. So it doesn't reveal anything more about what I look like or who I am or where I am in the world, other than this is an image you can trust. And so that's a pretty profound shift that doesn't require a compromise of privacy. So that's a reason that a user might want to hang on to the image, but it's me hanging on to the image and the proof related to that image to be able to add greater confidence and trust in the interactions that we're having. And that's the world that we imagine in the future. The world that we imagine in the future is one where there are lots of AI agents. They're doing things. It's good. But you can tell whether you're interacting with an AI agent or with a person. You can tell in real time whether that's truthful or not. And what I like about that is right now, when I look at a comment you are already saying, it's like annoying because I can kind of tell, although I'm probably not correct. But it's annoying that I have to wade my way through that. I would love to be able to just put a filter. Only show me things that came from real people. Only allow people to join my Zoom call if they're real. Only, et cetera, et cetera. And so this idea of creating more real human interaction, I think that's the new frontier. And we're just beginning to see some application developers think about what that looks like. one I'm happy to get into. I get excited about this stuff, but
I hope so. You're working there. You better get excited about it.
It's the little examples that I think are super interesting. There's an application one of our developers was showing me called Credit. Inside of the World app, there are these things called mini apps, which are applications that build on proof of humanity to give you some functionality. They run if you have developers, they just run as basic JavaScript inside the World app. So very, very lightweight, very, very simple to build them. What the Credit app does is it says, my assumption is that people are good. My assumption is that bots, I don't know. I can't make an assumption about them, but they're probably not good a lot of the time. And so because people are good, I'm willing to enter into a transaction with them. I'm willing to extend someone who is a person a small amount of credit just on the faith in humanity. And then over time, as I interact with them, I might extend them more credit in the future. And so this is micro lending that has been launched. It's out there. It's had hundreds of thousands of people who have used it, and they actually are real people. They can take a small loan, and over time, as they interact, they're able to get larger loans. And so it might be, I always think back on this situation where I tried to get gas in college, and I literally didn't have the $1.50 that I needed to buy a tank of gas. And so I was scrounging for coins that I'd lost in the car. I could have, if I had the Credit app, just said, give me $1.50 and I can buy a tank. It was a gallon of gas at the time. Now it's like a pint of gas. But but that's the kind of loan that you could get to facilitate that type of interaction. And then over time, it becomes more and more valuable. So there's lots of people who are looking for that type of thing. They're not able to access traditional banking. They're not looking to get a home mortgage. They don't want to fill out Know Your Customer. They don't want to do all of the stuff that the traditional financial system requires. But the combination of World ID and tokenized grants, basically, gives this app confidence that it can build a real business model and be profitable, which is pretty exciting.
Gotcha. I'm glad you brought up the tokens because I want to talk about that too. This has been a classic experience of mine whenever I meet with crypto companies or crypto adjacent companies. There's this very real problem that we're trying to solve, but you need some sort of incentive to kickstart the process, which is typically a token offering. And balancing the token ROI versus the behavior you're trying to incentivize, it's very, very hard. And most people have not got that right. So maybe can you help? I think the audience would probably understand the problem, like the rough shape of how you're trying to solve it. Maybe let's talk about the cryptocurrency,
Sure.
How it initially started and pitched and then kind of how it's shaped up today.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those who don't know, there is a token called Worldcoin. WLD is the symbol. You can go look at it. We have a white paper that describes the basic model. There are investors. We had venture capitalists that put in money because they were interested in the problem and they believed crypto and a token would enable that problem to be better solved. Initially, the primary use of the token was two things. The first was that it is an incentive. There are people who are motivated by getting access to a new token. So there are people who sign up because they're interested in the token. The second is that it is part ownership in the network. Our belief is if you're going to build a network that is intended to scale to global scale, it's important that the individual people have possession of it, ownership of it, control of it. And so everybody who goes and gets verified has the opportunity, if they would like to access some of the token. We've had about 17 million humans, actual humans, go to an actual orb. There are about 1,500 orbs, 1,500 orbs around the world right now. We have orbs operating in dozens of different countries. In the United States, there's one in Atlanta. There's several in a storefront in Atlanta, in Austin, Texas, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. So there's a bunch of different locations that people can go to. And if you go and you get verified, then through the World app, you can access the token. So you get airdrops on a recurring basis. And that's a sense of ownership, as well as it's an incentive for some people. Now, the second phase is how the token is associated with the core service itself. And here, the reality is maintaining a large-scale network is not free. And it requires ongoing investment, right? There are, as I mentioned, orbs around the world. Somebody has to build that hardware. Somebody has to have confidence that the hardware is trustworthy. They have to have a supply chain related to that. There are lots of costs in order to build this type of thing. And as a result, there needs to be an economic model to sustain the network on an ongoing basis. And so that's what we've also used the token for is to facilitate sustaining the network into the future. Our belief is there are large companies. We're already seeing some of them in the social space and the gaming space. One of my most interesting ones is actually the ticketing space. Right now, if I were to buy a ticket at a ticket window, you know that I'm a real human. You've sold it to me, and then I walk in the door. But mostly we've gone to online ticketing. And unfortunately, as we transition to mostly online ticketing, the scalpers also transition to mostly online ticketing. And so for any interesting event, it's immediately sold out by people who want to resell at a profit. And that's true whether it's tickets to a concert or tickets to a baseball game or tickets to, my favorite at the moment was the public golf courses in the city of Los Angeles. There was a lawsuit that was just settled last week around tax evasion because that became a multi-million-dollar business, like grabbing all of the free golf tickets, golf reservations, and then reselling them. And so building the infrastructure to have that type of protection costs money. But in addition, the service providers are interested in solutions to this problem. And so they're willing to pay. And so the token just facilitates that connection. It allows it to be a sustainable economic model into the future. But importantly, it's a sustainable economic model that is flowing the benefits to the users in the system because they're the owners of it. They're the ones that have tokens coming through the airdrops. And so that's the model that we're trying to create, is a long-term sustainable economic model that benefits what we call relying parties, provides credential issuers with a benefit as well, and ultimately is owned by the people who make up the network.
So when I was prepping for this interview, and you just type in World or Worldcoin on YouTube or whatever, most of it is either people who were early investors and the price is down quite a bit from over time, or there's WorldCoin scam, or there'll be, there's various legal actions that are going on. And I looked at that, and I listened to your very reasonable, this is our product, this is the problem we're solving. And I can't help but think, man, it seems like it would be a lot easier if this token didn't exist and you could just focus on serving human identity. I mean, and your background as well. You don't come from crypto.
Nope.
You're pretty pretty normal was the words about to come out of my mouth. But I mean, isn't that like an example of the problem? Like, we don't want there's such stigma and complications when it comes to using tokens as a way to fund the building of a network that I was like, I wonder if they started it today, if they would just skip the whole token thing and raise capital to solve AI identity and agents, because surely you would have been able to raise enough capital.
I think the reality, though, is this type of network has never been built. Right? Nobody has figured out what the right foundation is for doing this. And most identity systems right now online are ad-driven. Right? You use a sign-on model where you select your social provider, I'll use that phrase to make it sort of neutral, or your platform provider, and they can then see every single site that you're logging into, and they can use that to do more and more targeted advertising. The challenge, of course, is in that environment, everything that you do is tracked. And that's bad enough if you just care about privacy, but what if what you're concerned about is the long-term implications of more and more sophisticated AI? Now there's repositories of data about what you do, who you interact with, that are centralized, that are able to be accessed and sort of used against you. And so that's something that we're concerned about as well. But the short of it is, so far, nobody has found a way to fund these types of models. We think that the sort of decentralized mechanism is fundamentally important from a security standpoint. Having the economics be decentralized is also really, really important, because you don't want to have to trust a single centralized provider of your identity. You don't want to have to trust them from a security standpoint or a privacy standpoint. And so ultimately, we knew it needed to be a decentralized technology. It still does. And the way that decentralized technologies are funded is through tokens. But you're right. Like, I was never in tokens before. That's not really how I think about the problem that we're trying to solve. I think that's just a piece of technology, and we're using it as part of our solution.
I mean, I have to push back on that a little, because, like you said, Sam Altman is the co-founder of the company, and very publicly, OpenAI is working on a sign-in with ChatGPT feature, right? Like, so it seems like the co-founder of the company is doing the exact thing that the company is not supposed to do, which is forming a centralized identity that AI can use to customize, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I misreading the situation?
I mean, I think what you're describing that I actually am not super familiar with what it is that OpenAI is up to because they're doing so many things and all these companies are doing so many things. But I think it makes natural sense for that organization to build technology that in that fashion. That's what all of the other companies have done in that space. At the same time, World is a separate project. It's an open protocol. We're trying to make it as decentralized as possible. Tools for Humanity, again, separate company, and very focused on what if you didn't need to build your technology that way? And that's what we're imagining. My expectation, just going out a few years, would be that companies that really care about privacy, and I think Apple really cares about privacy. I think Google really cares about privacy. I know that is a controversial statement, but I worked there for a long time, and I think they actually do really care about privacy. I think OpenAI really cares about privacy. And once something like World is established and at global scale, I think those companies will say, we should really consider whether transitioning our sign-in mechanism to World is the right thing to do for users. And I think that they will, each and every one of them, legitimately consider that. Now, it's possible that they have a business trade-off, that they're going to lose access to some data that's important for targeting for one reason or another. But I still think there will be an active discussion about that. But we're new, right? I'm excited about the fact that we're at 17 million users. Well, 36 million users, I think, is the number, 17 million of which we know are real humans. But those are small numbers compared to large providers, right? And OpenAI is a large provider at this point.
What's the geographic distribution for those 17 million?
So there's concentration in a few specific regions. It's all over the world, hundreds of different countries. In fact, I don't think there's any country that we don't have some people who have signed up that have interacted with our services. They may not have signed up in that country. So for example, we've not had orbs in China, but we know that we have lots of users who have gone to China or come from China to get signed up, et cetera. There's geographic concentration in a handful of places. So Argentina, we have a very significant concentration. We picked up momentum in Argentina early 2024. And at this point, several million users in Argentina. Portugal is another area where we did.
What happened in 2024 in Argentina? Are they using World to access stable coins as an inflation hedge? Because for listeners unfamiliar, like Argentina is always having currency issues. But is that what was happening?
I think that certainly is a factor. There are certain parts of the world where crypto tokens are more popular. Argentina is one of them. They've had significant inflation in the past. There are also a number of potential integrations with the Argentine public services because they have a government that's provided extensive services. And we have found in conversations with governments that they tend to have an understanding of levels of fraud that's very different from what other sort of consumer services are. And so we've had some pretty strong success talking with governments about how something like World ID could be useful for solving some of those problems. The government of India launched a program several years ago called Aadhaar, which was an effort to create an identity layer in order to have access to services for all of their citizens. And in that sense, World ID is an interesting analog that a lot of other countries have been interested in talking about. So that's one of the reasons that Argentina picked up speed, both the crypto side and also the government services side. Portugal is another country where we have a fairly significant percentage of the adult population that signed up. There, it's primarily because that's where we did some of the early testing. And then it just began to snowball. Like once people realized that this was a real service and it created real value and they were interested in it, it began to accelerate. Currently, we're seeing our fastest growth in Asia. In Asia, there are other services that are more interesting to the population. So there's a company called Event Pop, for example. That's a ticketing company that has begun work on integration with our services, and they're pushing pretty hard on it. So we're frankly all over the world. There are a few markets where we have sort of double-digit population percentage adoption, and we're continuing to grow everywhere.
And so for those markets where you have enough penetration where it's meaningful, the digital providers, does the actual sign-up flow, is it like, when it says sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, then there will be a third button that says sign in with World?
We haven't seen a lot of that yet. It does exist. There are prototypes of it. What we have begun to see is developer interest. So in Argentina, for example, we've now had significant percentage of the population, youthful population. There's actually a lot of software developers in Argentina. And so we've begun to see targeted applications at specific challenges that they have in their environment. I think I mentioned earlier the credit app, built by two developers from Argentina. And an awful lot of the loans that are being issued are probably, we don't know, but probably for people in Argentina, because the application has more downloads in Argentina.
So is for these 17 million people, are most of the that are world users, most of their time is using the world app and the micro apps within the world app versus using it as a pure identity layer to sign into other applications.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Gotcha.
So they're either using it as, so there's two parts to the world app, three really. One that you described is tokens. So interacting with the world chain, interacting with WLD, which is the Worldcoin itself, or trading or transferring that, using blockchain technologies. There's the second part, which is this thing called mini apps, which you can think of as a version of the App Store if you're an Apple person, or Google Play if you're a Google person, directly inside of World App. And there are hundreds of applications that have been built by individual developers that provide different functionality. So it's everything from small games. There's a game called Colonies that a lot of people here like playing for some reason. I'm not a fan, but they are. Not to put it down, I think it's an interesting game, but it's not one that speaks to me. The credit app. There are lots of social apps. So there's a chat app, and it helps that you're interacting with real people. And then the third part is the use of World ID for other services, and so verifying that you have a valid World ID. So it's a wallet in that sense as well.
What's the team size for World right now?
Yeah. So I'm in San Francisco. We have an office here south of Market. We have a couple hundred people that come into the office on a regular basis.
Wow.
We also have a significant presence in Munich, Germany. The founding team was mostly from Germany, but had all been at school in the United States. And so there's a mix between those two locations. And we have hundreds of people around the world, I think is sort of the overall size at the moment. But those are the two biggest locations, San Francisco and Munich.
One thing that was confusing to me, because I worry as a listener, there's an app and an orb and a token and there's world and there's tools for humanity, and it just, I've been in enough startups that are scaling quickly. When you're adding those millions of users, things are breaking if you're just like one company, but it seems like you got multiple, the organizational complexity of multiple companies and managing token economics, and like that feels deeply overwhelming to me as a former operator. How do you manage that? Like, how do you deal with all that?
There's a lot of moving parts, for sure. And I'm somewhat fortunate. My background is in security, but it's in security building platforms. So we're literally across the street from Adobe. I spent the beginning of my career helping build the Flash platform security model, as well as a bunch of things for the web. And thinking about how do you build tooling for ecosystems is what I do. And then from there, I went to some other startups, and then I went to Android and helped build out security for Android platform. Again, like how do you deal with lots of different OEMs? How do you deal with lots of different manufacturers? Every carrier, whether in the US, it's like Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile, they all have different. How do you make things work in that environment? And then similarly at Atlassian, where we had developer tools that were so this model, you're right, it's complicated, and there are a lot of moving parts, and you have to have people who are used to thinking through what that could look like. And so that's how we've been approaching it. I think soon we will begin to see more and more specialization. One thing I've been emphasizing is there's a ton of enterprise use cases. Enterprise use cases usually have a different sale model, usually have a different go-to-market. I think in the future we may see some differentiation there. We've already begun to see some applications in the enterprise space. There's one called Outtake, which is a startup which focuses on integrity of email, where it can be a plugin into Gmail is how we're using it. It could be other email applications as well, where it tells you this email came from a real human. And you can do a real-time check when you go to send the email, where it'll check against your World ID that you are still the holder of that World ID. And so it associates that. It doesn't know who you are, but it knows you're the same person that's sending email from the same account on an ongoing basis. And so that's an interesting integrity improvement to the enterprise. It's very different from trying to help a dating network, for example.
Gotcha. As a leadership team, how do you actually manage this? When you do your Monday morning stand up and you have all your KPIs and dashboards, what is the thing as an organization you optimize for? Typically you'll have, we're fixing margins this month or whatever it may be. You can't do that with something this complex. How do you balance all that?
I mean, you should still think about margins.
Yeah.
You should still think
No, no,
about
no,
customer
no, no.
acquisition
You're in
costs.
Silicon Valley. You don't think about margins. You're beyond that.
No, those topics certainly come up, and we do think about them. But I think our top line strategy has been very, very transparent. We've talked about it publicly. It's scale first, and so the belief is that as the network grows, as the number of orbs out in the world gets larger, as the time that it takes for a human to get to one of those orbs, as the throughput at those orbs is increased, as the number of users that have already joined the network increases, all of those things drive network level efficiencies and network level effects. And so that's our top line number, is how many people have been verified and how's that going. And then we have some second order ones on how many markets are we in, how distributed are the orbs. And then a third one around what is the set of use cases and how are we diversifying and growing that. And mini apps have been going gangbusters. They've been growing very, very quickly. But we're also spending a lot of time talking to large web properties about what that could look like as well.
I want to talk a little bit about actually signing people up for the orb and signing up for the token. To prep for this, I was just talking to friends about this project who are unfamiliar with it. And so I would text them a picture of the orb and I'd say, you scan your face with this and it helps identify you. And they're like, what do you think? And almost universally, and it could just be my Luddite friends, but they're like, I hate that shit. It's just like, that's creepy.
I suspect it's actually not your Luddite friends. I think the more techno-savvy you are, the stronger your response in that manner. Because I think the people that we find are like, that's interesting, I want to know more, tend to be what I would think of as Luddites. My mom and my dad were like, that's super interesting, tell us more.
Yeah, gotcha.
Although I guess they've always said that about my stuff.
Yeah, my son and Android platform security, interesting, tell us more.
Yeah.
I bring this up not as like a gotcha. I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but like the orb shit can come off as kind of creepy. Like how do you deal with that? How do you convince people to sign up to scan their face and their eyeball?
It was always intended to be a provocation.
Yeah.
And it still is a provocation. It's an ask for a user to think about the experience that they're having, right? We're not surreptitiously trying to capture an image. We're not looking like another camera so that you're like, oh, it's just a camera. We're asking you as a human to engage with the reality that is currently happening. AI is becoming more of a challenge. What are you doing about it? How are you thinking about it? And stimulating that discussion, I think, is a worthwhile thing to do. And for a long time, there were lots of companies who were like, no, it's fine. We'll just do it on our own. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. And so we want people to engage with this and think about it. But yeah, it is interesting from an industrial design standpoint how that plays out and how people think about it.
How do you actually incentivize them? Like, to my mind, it seemed like it'd be easier. You just say, hey, we're going to take a picture and give you $25 at DoorDash. Like just give them a gift card. How are you actively signing people up today? Like, do you have, like, is it incentive structures? Is it just the token, or how does that work?
So it's still super early. I think a lot of people that we see that are signing up if I go out and I do surveys, which we've done in every market. In fact, in the US is where I happen to have the data sort of closer to my fingertips. In almost every market, roughly 80% of people say that they're encountering AI slop right now. That on a daily basis, they find it annoying in some context or another, and that they're looking for some solution for that. And they don't know what it is. And then you get into specifics and you'll find 60 to 70% of people would say a biometric as a mechanism to solve this is a very worthwhile thing to do, but they have concerns about privacy and security. Okay, that totally makes sense. That all tracks, right? But it's the sense of not knowing what they could do, not knowing how they could help, that I think stymies people. They know that they can't rely on the existing service providers who sort of got them into the situation to start with to solve the problem. And so once they realize that World and Tools for Humanity are trying to build a solution for this, then many of them are intrigued just by that. Now, that conversation might be happening on an individual consumer basis. It actually works more often than you might think. Or it might be happening at a service level, right? I can have this conversation with anybody who's building a social app. Or like the classic example is e-commerce, right? I want to be able to give out a coupon or a discount, but as soon as I do that, everybody takes advantage of it and I can no longer get my margins, right? Everybody claims I'm a first-time customer. I'm like, but I'm sending the thing to your same address that I did last month. It's a subscription. How could you be a first-time customer? And so knowing that there is something that can help solve those types of challenges is useful for them. And so then they begin asking the right questions, which is like, what is the privacy model? What is the security model? And then we engage with that. And they find that it's very compelling, and they're ready to go have a conversation about what integration looks like.
When you say we engage with that, like, are you is it just like putting out videos on YouTube? Is it doing the podcast rounds like we're doing today? Or are you actively running consumer marketing campaigns?
So we are definitely running some consumer marketing campaigns. There are several that we've done. One of the ones that we just did one down on the seashore in Los Angeles, where we had some animated bots walking around, and we were actually sort of canvassing and talking with people. We did one in Mexico where Lucha Libre, which are the wrestlers that have masks, and we're like, well, what does that mean? How do you take that identity and still use that identity in a trustworthy way online? So there are definitely some consumer-oriented provocations that we're doing. And then we also are doing podcasts and broader outreach. Ultimately, I mean, some folks would like to think that this is a giant consumer brand. I think ultimately this is a developer play. This is critical infrastructure. It needs to be in place. And we need to have confidence in how it works. And so the deep technical understanding is what's critical. The fact that it's a decentralized technology, the fact that all of the crypto, and when I say crypto in my world, it means cryptography. The fact that all of the cryptography actually makes sense. The fact that user data is protected at a level that is unprecedented in a consumer service. The fact that we, meaning World Foundation, Worldcoin, Tools for Humanity, none of those entities that are building this core technology actually hold any user data that's generated by the orb. Right? The orb takes those pictures and then it gives it to the user, and then it uses anonymizing and privacy-preserving mechanisms to make sure that none of the data ends up in our hands. Like, that's foundationally different technology. And so explaining that and making sure that every cryptographer that's out there, every security professional, every privacy professional can understand it, there's a lot of outreach for that as well. In fact, a lot of the work that we do in talking with governments is explaining it because it's sufficiently different from what they're used to that they have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Do they, in the meetings, use my French of saying shit's weird? Or are they like, we're interested?
I don't think I've had a government regulator swear at me. They tend to be a lot more polite. But I worked for an Australian company previously. It may be that when we interact with the Australian regulators, they'll do that. And that's just because they're good people, and that's the type of language that they use.
Gotcha. Kind of in a roundabout way, I think you just called me impolite for swearing, but I'm going to take it under advisement. My wife would agree with you.
Just not excessively polite.
Okay. Can you walk me through what's the product roadmap look like from here? Because you have the core orbs, you have the core orb technology, you have the cryptography and all the privacy preserving technology built. Yep. What is the tech that you're building from here on out?
Lots of stuff. So let's look just at the orb. It's currently fairly expensive. A couple $1,000 is the sort of bill of materials cost associated with an orb. We think that technology has gotten better than when we first built it a couple of years ago. So we think the hardware components can be miniaturized. We think that they can be made smaller. We think there are some improvements that have been made in operating systems for those devices, and so we can take advantage of some of that. It's not unreasonable to imagine that a bowling ball-sized camera could be down to the size of, say, a cell phone or a handheld camera in the next year or two. We've already demonstrated some of our thinking on that, something that we're calling Orb Mini. Eventually, I believe it could be down to the size of a component that fits into a cell phone, and maybe even cost-effective enough to have it be in the cell phone. There are a lot of other industry efforts to add integrity on cameras. There's something called C2PA, which is around content provenance, which is trying to have, can I tell that this was a real image that came from a real camera? And so those are beginning to be incorporated as well. Like 5 years ago, that would have seemed impossible, but now it's beginning to happen. Right? The newest version of the Google phones included C2PA attestations for the images that are captured on the Pixel devices. So you could imagine some of the work that we've been doing sort of lining up there. On the software side, scaling it up, one really important change that we're working on is making it so that the World app is not necessary. So currently, the World app holds the user's private keys associated with their World ID. It's used for doing all of your attestations and things like that. In the future, users might want to use different apps. They might want to use multiple apps. I imagine a world where you're using lots of different devices and lots of different apps, and all of them should be able to interact with your World ID on sort of equal footing. And so designing the architecture to scale horizontally across the complexity of a user's experience is a big part of our roadmap right now. And doing that in a way that just because you used it on one device that happens to have been compromised with malware doesn't mean your World ID is compromised. So that's a super interesting technical problem. As a security and cryptographer sort of by training, thinking through what that should look like is pretty interesting. There's an organization called FIDO for the technology savvy people that worked on something called passkeys. And that's one of the challenges that they've been trying to think through is how do you have authentication be as robust as hardware, but also sort of federalized across your different devices so that you can use all of them in an even footing. And so we're trying to think through how World ID can interoperate with those things as well. So a lot of it is how do you weave this into the complex world that is the world that we live in and give proof of humanity an equal footing on the internet with the other sort of roots of trust that already exist.
Right now, the problem that you're solving feels only to the terminally online important, like only if you're just spend too much time on the internet where you're like, oh, this AI slop, At what level of either capability or volume maybe do AI agents have to be, or AI slop have to be a problem where, world goes kind of from a nice to have to, oh, we have to have this right now. How do you think about that timeline for internally?
Yeah, I think there are a variety of different things that we've looked at. Like one is at what point does the network begin to accelerate on its own? Another is at what point are there several other businesses that are profitable based on their use of it? Mm. So there's a few different ways to think about it. My view is there are already people for whom this is no longer nice to have. And it's just a question of how do you make it accessible to everyone? And so that's sort of how I've been thinking about it. I don't know that there is like a specific moment. I think if you're building something at the scale of all of humanity, your inflection point is different from my inflection point, is different from my kid's inflection point, is different from a government's inflection point. And what's important is that every one of them should be able to trust the technology so that they can all use the same technology. Sadly, in the identity space, that's never been the case. In the identity space, every single application that tries to create identity says, I need to worry about my identity. And so it's incredibly Byzantine. It's incredibly broken down. And there's a lack of trust. I look at the United States. Every state issues its own driver's license. Every agency at the federal level issues its own identity, right? Your social security number is not the same as your passport number. And then we sort of like try to cobble it together and link them because it turns out there's only one person for all of those things. And so we glue technologies together that are not privacy preserving, and we create an even worse mess. And so we think that if we incorporate a little humility in the design and allow third-party credential providers to connect to proof of human and do so in a private way, then it can scale to all of those different use cases and still be private. And so that's what we're trying to do. And so that means there's not a single inflection point. There's going to be use case by use case inflection point. There's going to be partner by partner inflection point.
Yeah, because when I was thinking about the AI slop, I was like, it's a little bit with Sam as the co-founder. It's a little bit the dealer building the rehab clinic here, where it's like maybe the inflection point is GPT, 7, where the AI slop is so indistinguishable from human work, And so that was I wondered, I was like, is it an AI capabilities thing? The better Sam's company goes over here, the more Sam's company's other solution becomes more urgent.
Last I checked, there were a lot of people making investments in AI. And I think it's also worth pointing out that, we had problems with automation and trust online well before AI became a thing.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I don't want to say we're trying to solve an older problem, but I think we are. And when I was working on Android, a lot of our effort was, how do you detect a malware author? How do you respond to the malware author? People were submitting stuff to Google Play constantly. We were flagging it, taking it down, et cetera. And so this type of technology that manages to be private, but also manages to provide a root of trust for making those types of decisions is something that we never had. But if we had it, we would have been able to protect people a lot more effectively. So that's what we hope for in the future.
Typically for a company, you're like, oh, we IPO'd, we did it, or we achieved some technical milestone. For a little bit different here, both from a financial perspective and from a tech perspective. I'm curious for you, you're earlier on in your tenure at World, what is the point where you'll be able to tell your team, we did it?
Man, it's a good question. Because what I'm trying to think through is like, when the team that built the internet, when did they say we did it? And do you think they think they're done? I'm not sure. Does Tim Berners-Lee, when he's thinking about the web, say, the web, it's done, we did it? Undoubtedly, he's had a moment of success, right? Like, this has gone far further along than I ever expected it would. It's clearly very valuable, but there's still more work to be done. I anticipate that it'll be similar for us, that in any given moment, we'll be able to look back and we'll be able to say, remember when there was nobody that had a world ID? Remember when we had the first orb? Remember when we had the first mini app? Remember when we had the first instance of a large social network using our technology? Remember, I think that's probably how it's going to work. Maybe we'll be done at some point, but I'm not sure.
I love that. And I also like that comparison because I think it shows the scale of the ambition of World, which is best comparison is, when is the internet done? So I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to, actually, last question. Sure. Do you call it getting orbed? That was what I was like, getting your picture. Go get orbed. If people want to get, what is the right word?
Verified. They want to get a verified World ID.
Nope, it's orbed. If you want to get verified and or orbed, where should they go to find to learn more?
If you go to your local app store and you grab the World app and you install the World app, then A, you'll learn more, and B, inside the World app, you can find out where the closest orbs are for you.
Okay. Hey, well, this was really fun. Thank you so much.
You bet.